You know that feeling? When your RC car just hooks up and flows through a corner, totally planted.
Oh, yeah. Magic.
Well, a lot of that magic comes down to the shock springs, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Often overlooked, but so, so important.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into Tamiya RC shock springs. Specifically for you listening, you want the crucial info, quick and clear, without getting totally bogged down.
And that's the goal. It's actually amazing how these little coils of wire can make such a huge difference in how a car feels and performs.
They're kind of the unsung heroes of handling, connecting the car to the track or the trail.
Exactly.
Our sources, they give a pretty amazing overview of Tamiya's lineup. I mean, there's a ton of them, different sizes, different hardnesses, all those colors.
Well, I do a whole spectrum.
So our mission here is to cut through all that and pull out the must-know stuff. By the end of this, you should really get how these springs work, how they affect handling, and how you can actually use them for tuning.
Yeah, and it's also worth remembering, Tamiya designs these as part of their whole hop-up option system.
Right, the ecosystem idea.
Exactly. They're not just standalone bits. They're meant to work with specific dampers with other parts to get a complete suspension package.
Okay, let's get down to it then. When you pick up a Tamiya spring, what are the core things we need to understand?
Fundamentally, there are three main things. Spring rate, that's how stiff it is. Then the length, the physical size. And of course, the color coding Tamiya uses.
Okay, spring rate. That sounds like the big one. What exactly does that term mean?
Yeah, it is crucial. Basically, spring rate or hardness, it tells you how much force you need to squeeze that spring down by a certain amount.
Like newtons per millimeter or something?
Exactly, M and Wien, or sometimes you see pounds per inch. Higher number means a stiffer spring. Resists being compressed more.
Got it. So how does Tamiya actually tell us how stiff a spring is? It can't just be guesswork when you're trying to tune.
No, definitely not. They use a few ways. Color codes are super common. You'll see little paint dots or colored heat shrink tubing. Sometimes the whole spring is colored.
Yeah.
Then there are descriptive words. Soft, medium, hard, maybe an extra hard.
Simple enough.
And for some of the high-end stuff, like the TRF racing springs, they might actually give you the numerical rate, the NME value.
So the colors, is it like red's always soft, blue's always hard? Is there a standard?
That's the catch. No, the color meaning isn't universal across all Tamiya spring sets.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a red mark on a touring car spring might be totally different stiffness-wise from a red mark on, say, a buggy spring set. And those words, soft, medium, hard, they're relative within that specific package of springs.
Ah, okay. So a soft spring for a big, heavy truck is probably way stiffer in reality than a soft spring for a tiny M chassis car.
Precisely. Absolutely. Which is why you really need to look at the part numbers. And even better, the official Tamiya spring charts, especially for comparing across different types of cars.
The charts are the definitive source then?
Yeah, because sometimes, info on a website or even the packaging might be slightly different and less specific. The charts usually have the hard data.
That makes total sense. Okay, so stiffness is key. What about the length? You mentioned different sizes.
Right. Length is the second big thing. You'll see standard length springs, maybe 27, 28 millimeters or so. But then there are short springs, which are becoming really common, especially in modern on-road touring cars.
Why short springs? Just for lower cars?
Well, they often go with shorter shock absorbers, yeah, to get that lower profile. But length does more than just fit the shock. It's a primary factor in setting your car's static ride height.
How high the chassis sits off the ground.
Exactly. Shorter spring, generally lower ride height, all else being equal. But then you use preload, those threaded collars or little clips on the shock body.
Right, to tweak it.
Yeah, to fine-tune the ride height precisely where you want it, regardless of the exact spring length you chose. It adjusts the spring's starting compression point.
So ride height is the main reason for different lengths.
It's a huge part of it. Tamiya talks a lot about ride height because it affects your center of gravity, stability, how the car rolls. And spring stiffness also affects ride height because it changes how much the car sags under its own weight.
Okay.
But going beyond just ride height, shorter springs can subtly change handling dynamics too, like how quickly the chassis reacts to steering, how it rolls. In high grip racing, people often like that quicker, more direct feel you can get with shorter springs.
Interesting. Okay, so rate, length, and back to color. If it's not a universal hardness guide, what's the main point of the colors then?
The main job is just quick ID within a single set. So if you buy a pack with soft, medium, and hard springs, they'll usually have different color marks, red, yellow, blue, whatever. Makes it easy to grab the right one when you're making quick changes, trackside.
Just for convenience.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, sometimes there's an aesthetic thing too, right? Like those cool black springs or the fancy mica blue plated ones. But function number one is telling them apart within their own set.
Got it. Okay, so we understand rate, length, and colors role. Now, the really important bit. How does fiddling with these actually change how the car drives? Out on the track or bashing around?
Right, this is where it gets practical. The springs are basically controlling how the suspension moves, absorbing bumps, managing weight shift when you accelerate, brake, turn. They're fundamental to grip and stability.
Let's start with stiffness, maybe the most obvious one. Soft versus hard springs. What's the difference you actually feel?
Okay, so stiffness dictates how much the spring compresses under load and how fast it bounces back, the rebound. Softer springs compress more easily.
Right.
That means you'll see more chassis roll in corners, more weight shifting front to back when you hit the gas or brakes.
And is that ever good? More roll?
Oh, definitely. On surfaces that are bumpy, loose, low traction, that extra movement can actually help the tires stay in contact with the ground better. More mechanical grip.
Ah, like the chassis conforms more.
Exactly. Plus, softer springs just soak up bumps better, smooth a ride. The downside, the car could feel a bit less sharp, maybe slightly lazy responding to steering, and too much weight transfer can cause problems like instability or big wheelies if you've got loads of power.
Okay.
Interestingly, Mark Pavidis, the RC legend, he's mentioned that on really slick tracks, sometimes going a bit softer helps because that extra roll slows the car's reactions down, makes it easier to control.
Soft for slippery and bumpy. What about going stiffer then? What are the pros there?
Stiffer is kind of the opposite. Less chassis roll, less weight transfer. That means quicker direction changes, a more direct, connected feeling.
More responsive.
Yeah. Generally what you want on smooth, high-grip surfaces where you want the car to stay flat. Stiffer springs are also better for landings. After jumps, they resist bottoming out the chassis. The trade-off, though, is on bumpy or low-grip tracks. Stiff springs can make the car skip and bounce, losing traction. Oh, and in drag racing, sometimes people run stiffer rear springs to help plant the rear tires on launch. Helps with traction, stops wheelies. Right, so softer grip on rough stuff, stiff for precision on smooth tracks and jumps. Okay, what about length again and that ride height connection?
So like we said, length plus your preload setting gives you your static ride height. Going lower, shorter springs or more preload drops the center of gravity.
Which is usually good.
Yeah.
More stable.
Usually, yeah. Better stability, less roll, especially on smooth tracks where you don't need much ground clearance.
But there's a catch.
Always. Go too low, and you risk the chassis slapping the ground, bottoming out over bumps, or even just under hard corner and braking. And that can make you lose control instantly.
Yeah. And higher ride height. Better for clearing rough ground, obviously, but you might get more roll, feel less stable at speed. The key thing tuners do is maybe pick a spring length for its rate or how it affects the suspension geometry, then use preload to nail the perfect ride height for that track.
It's interconnected. Length, rate, preload.
Exactly. It all works together.
Okay, what about the balance? Front springs versus rear springs. How does changing the stiffness at one end affect cornering?
Oh, hugely important. The relative stiffness front to rear is a primary way you tune for understeer or oversteer.
Understeer is when the front pushes wide.
Right. Doesn't want to turn in. Oversteer is when the rear end wants to slide out.
Okay, so how do springs influence that?
Generally, if you make the front spring stiffer compared to the rear, the front resists rolling more, shifting the balance towards oversteer. The rear wants to rotate more.
Stiffer front, more oversteer.
Yep. And the opposite, softer front springs relative to the rear, usually leads to more understeer. The front washes out more easily.
So you can tune the car's cornering attitude just with springs?
It's a major tool for it, yeah. Again, Mark Pavidis often suggests changing springs at both ends together to keep the overall balance, unless you're specifically trying to fix an understeer or oversteer problem, like that TTO2 setup for carpet.
Right, you mentioned stiffer blue front, softer yellow rear.
Yeah, that's a common starting point to get a nice balanced feel on high grip carpet. Balances responsiveness with rear grip.
Gotcha. Now one more type, progressive springs. What's different about those?
Progressive springs, like those barrel-shaped ones for the CC01 crawler sometimes, their stiffness isn't constant. It actually increases the more you compress them.
So they start soft and get harder.
Exactly. So they're really good at soaking up small bumps and chatter initially, giving you compliance. But when you hit a big bump or lean hard into a corner, They stiffen up to provide more support and resist bottoming out.
Best of both worlds, potentially.
Kind of, yeah. Especially good for vehicles that see a mix of terrain.
Man, okay. So choosing springs is way more than just grabbing a color. It's this mix of the hard data, the NM numbers, and then just how it feels to drive.
Absolutely. To me, it gives you this huge toolbox of springs, and it really encourages you to experiment. Find what works for your driving style, your track. The goal is fast, obviously, but also confidence-inspiring. You want a car that feels good, feels predictable.
Okay, let's dive into some specifics then. Tamiya has got a massive range for on-road. Touring cars are huge. Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. For touring cars, you can kind of split them into, let's say, standard length springs around 27, 28 mil, and then the short springs maybe 23 to 25 mil, which are super common now.
What are some key standard length sets?
Well, a classic is the 53163 on-road tune spring set. Neon red for soft, neon yellow medium, neon blue stiff, about 28 millimeters long. Great all-rounder for touring cars, even some rally cars. Then there's the 533440 on-road spring set. Hard. Gives you red soft, yellow medium, blue hard, and even a white, extra hard. Designed for more stability at high speed, often recommended for things like the Tamiya Porsche Cup on a TT02.
And the popular short spring sets, the ones everyone seems to use now.
Yeah, the 42168 touring car short spring set is probably one of the most common. Black springs, 25 millimeters long, red mark for soft, yellow mark for medium, blue mark for hard.
Got it.
Then there's the 54797 short spring set 2, designed to complement the first set. Gives you super hard, white mark, medium hard, gold mark, and medium soft, black no mark. These are a bit shorter, 23 millimeter.
Those little gaps.
Exactly. And if you're running the really short SSBB dampers, there's the 42306 large diameter short spring set. They're also 23 millimeter, despite some confusion, and come in hard, blue mark, medium yellow mark, soft, red mark, all on black springs.
Okay.
And finally, the high-end TRF large diameter springs like 42278 or 42293 often have that mica blue look, around 20.3 millimeters long, available in super soft, soft medium.
Wow, loads of choice. So how do you pick between those for, say, carpet versus asphalt?
Same basic idea applies. More grip needs stiffer springs. So for high bike carpet, you'll lean towards the stiffer end, maybe blue or white fronts from those sets, paired with yellow or blue rears on something like a TT02.
To keep it flat and responsive.
Right. Then on tarmac, usually less grip, you might soften it up a bit, maybe yellows on the front, let the car roll a bit more to generate mechanical grip. Harder for high grip, softer for lower grip. That's the core rule.
And you mentioned there's a table in our source with actual M rates for a lot of these. That sounds super useful.
Invaluable, yeah. It lets you see the objective difference in stiffness, length, even coil count. It's great for seeing exactly how much harder the hard spring is than the medium in a set, for example. And it helps clear up things like that color marking quirk on the 42168 set. The chart has the real specs.
Okay, moving down in size, M chassis cars. Little cars, short wheelbase, some are front drive, some rear. What's the thinking there?
Yeah, M chassis are fun. Their short wheelbase and different drive layouts definitely influence spring choice. When people upgrade to aluminum shocks, like the 54,000 set, they often end up using short touring car springs.
Like the 42168 set you mentioned?
Exactly. That's a really common choice for M chassis. You also see forum chat about the 53333 short springs, or even using really soft gold front springs from older MO4 or MO8 kits for niche things like an MO5 rally build. And does the front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive matter much for springs? Oh, absolutely. Weight distribution's key. Yeah. A front-heavy FWD car, like an MO5, doesn't have much weight over the rear wheels, right? So you might run the absolute softest springs you can find back there.
To let the rear suspension work at all.
Pretty much. Conversely, sometimes experienced racers might even put slightly harder rear springs on a FWD car to try and make the front end bite harder into corners. It's all about shifting that handling balance.
Clever. Okay, now F1 cars. Very unique suspension.
Yeah, totally different game. F1 chassis usually have separate springs controlling different movements. You've got roll springs for side-to-side roll.
Okay.
Pitch or damper springs for front-to-back movement, usually linked to the rear pod.
Right.
And then regular coil springs on the independent front suspension arms.
So 3 sets of springs to 2.
Basically, yeah. For something like an F104, you might see the 54352 roll spring set. Black is super hard, gold is hard, silver medium, copper pink is soft. The 54359 pitch spring set often uses the same color hardness scale. And then for the front, maybe the 50509 set with black, hard, gold medium, silver soft.
And you mentioned the descriptions for hardness can sometimes be a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, occasionally you'll see slightly different terms used in different Tamiya materials. Most racers tend to trust what's on the packaging or in the kit manual for that specific chassis. Like for the F104 V2, gold is generally considered hard for the petrol springs. Tuning an F1 car is really about finding the right harmony between those three spring systems. It can be tricky.
All right, let's shift gears to off-road. Dirt, jumps, bumps. Buggies first. What are the key spring options there?
Modern race buggies, especially Tamiya's TRF line and recent kits, often use their big bore aeration dampers. These are larger diameter shocks, more oil volume, better consistency.
It's better performance on rough stuff.
Exactly, and they have specific spring sets designed for them.
Like what?
Okay, for the rear, a common one is 54508 big bore rear spring set. Comes with soft red tube, medium yellow tube, hard blue tube. These are colored tubes over black springs. Fits a ton of buggies. BB01, PD4, TD2, DB series, DF03, TRF buggies. Very versatile.
And the rates are known for those.
Roughly, yeah. Around 0.37 talometer for soft, 0.40 for medium, 0.43 for hard, give or take. For the 4WD buggies, there's 54506. Same color scheme, fits things like the DB buggies, TD4, TRF 4WDs, even the XV02 rally car.
And for 2WD fronts?
54507 big bore front spring set, 2WD aeration. It's the DNO RF20212 Evolate. Probably uses similar colors.
Are there still options for buggies not using big bores?
Oh, yeah. There's the 53975 TRF 501X rear setting, spring set, hard, medium, soft, that fits various models. And an interesting one is the 54221 TRF21 front spring set. Comes in brown, 2.8 millimeter, black, 2.9, green, 3.1. These are actually quite soft. Some people even use them for custom trail trucks if they manage the length. Plus specific sets for older chassis, like the DF03, 49431, 53927.
So tuning off-road, similar principles to on-road. Softer for bumps, stiffer for jumps, and high grip.
Pretty much, yeah. Softer springs help soak up ruts and bumps, maintain traction on loose dirt or rough tracks. Stiffer springs give more support for landing big jumps, prevent bottoming out, and can work better on high grip surfaces like AstroTurf or clay. Spring lengths can also play a role in how the buggy packs up the face of a jump and lands. Longer springs might offer more bottoming resistance if the shocks allow the travel.
And again, our source is a handy table for off-road buggy springs.
Yep, summarizing the sets, colors, hardness, and what chassis dampers they fit. Really useful, quick reference.
Okay, what about the big boys? Monster trucks, scale trucks. They need heavy-duty springs, right?
Definitely. Way heavier vehicles. Lots of abuse. For classics like the Clodbuster or Bullhead, the stock friction shocks and springs are pretty basic. Most people upgrade to aftermarket oil shocks and much beefier springs. Companies like CPE make specific kits.
Right.
The TXT2 Agrios, Tamiya, offers optional aluminum shocks, 54472, but they don't come with springs, so you have to source aftermarket ones. The stock TXT2 springs are actually known for being quite soft, sometimes used for custom crawler projects, but generally too went for serious monster truck bashing without better damping. For solid axle trucks, controlling axle wrap and having durable springs is crucial.
And scale trucks often use leaf springs.
Yeah, like the high lift series of the Bruiser. Leaf springs are different. Their stiffness comes from the arc and number of leaves. Some high lift kits even let you adjust the configuration a bit.
Rally cars next, the mix of on-road and off-road.
Right, need that balance. For the XV01, there's the 54465 Gert spring set, hard silver, medium gold, soft black, works with TRF or CVA shocks. For the newer XV02, the Q2051 setting spring set has soft black, medium gold, that's the kit one, and hard silver. Interestingly, these XV02 springs are longer, 40 millimeters.
For more suspension travel.
Most likely, yeah. Good for soaking up rough rally stages.
And finally, crawlers. All about the flex.
Totally. Maximum articulation, keeping tires glued to rocks at slow speeds. For the CR01, there's the 54029 setting spring set. Hard blue, medium yellow, soft red. Crawler springs are usually long and quite soft to allow that suspension to twist and conform to crazy terrain.
Wow, okay, that covers a huge amount of ground. Tamiya really does have a spring for pretty much everything.
They really do. And for people who get serious, especially on-road racing, Tamiya provides that amazing resource, the detailed spring rate chart. It's like the Rosetta Stone for their springs.
Because it gives the actual numbers, not just colors or medium.
Exactly. It lists the measured rate, is usually, the free length, even the number of wire coils for tons of their springs. So you can objectively compare a medium from one set to a soft from another.
So you can really fine-tune based on data.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with the 42168 set, the colors might seem odd, but the chart tells you the actual stiffness. Our source, pulling some of that chart data into a table, is super helpful for making informed choices.
Okay, so wrapping all this up, If someone's listening and wants to start playing with springs, what's the practical advice?
Okay, first, think about your vehicle's weight. Heavier car generally needs stiffer springs. Lighter car can use softer ones.
Makes sense.
Second, your driving surface. Smooth, high-grip track, lean stiffer for response. Bumpy, loose, low grip, go softer for traction and bump handling.
Right.
Third, use that front-to-rear stiffness balance to tune cornering. Remember, stiffer front, more oversteer tendency. Softer front, more understeer tendency.
Got it.
If you're thinking about shorter springs, remember they affect ride height and can change roll dynamics, maybe make the car feel quicker reacting.
Okay.
And maybe the most important thing, springs don't work in isolation. They're part of the whole suspension package. Change springs, you often need to think about your shock oil, maybe the pistons. It's a holistic approach.
Tune the system, not just the part.
Exactly. See spring tuning as one part of your overall setup strategy.
And the source even gives some example starting setups for popular cars,
Yeah.
right? Like in a table.
Yeah, that's a great feature. It lists chassis like the TTO2, MO5, buggies, etc., and suggests specific spring sets, part number and color hardness, for front and rear, for different uses like carpet or dirt. Mentions compatible shocks, too.
Just a starting point, though.
Absolutely. Kit springs are a baseline. Those examples are good guides, but you'll always need to tweak based on your car, your track, your feel.
Well, this has been seriously informative. It's amazing how much goes into just these little coils of wire.
It really is. And understanding them unlocks so much tuning potential. It's incredible.
So the big takeaway for you listening, Tamiya gives you a massive toolbox with all these springs. Understanding rate, length, and how to use the color codes, mostly within a set, is key.
And remember that comparing across sets, especially for different car types, you really want to look at those specs, the NM rates, the lengths, if you can find them on those charts.
The ideal setup, it really depends on your car, where you drive it, and how you like it to feel.
It's personal and it's situational.
And don't forget, springs work with your dampers, your geometry. Tune it all together.
Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Knowing that even a tiny change in spring stiffness or length can make such a noticeable difference. What small spring experiment could you try on your own RC car next time you run it? What new level of performance or just driving feel might you unlock?